is more like I will always remember what Handel's Harp Sonata, which someone thought to play every 2 weeks at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, by the way. Not Harp Concerto, excuse me.
I'm actually not familiar with that one, so I am.
The number of things I am unfortunately familiar with.
Hi everyone, welcome to OSA Backstage. Sauce, Serena, and I have a real treat for you today, and that's a conversation with KVNO's own Ben Rasmussen. Ben and I have been friends for a long time. It was a thrill to have him on the podcast, especially because we got him to talk about how he was peer pressured into tuba as a high schooler, and it potentially, along with a few other very crucial things, led him down the road to classical Omaha radio. It was a joy. We have some new digs that you're going to hear all about, and we think you're going to love it. Enjoy.
The technology these days.
Yeah. So if I sit right here, what you can do is you can just crop me. Perfect. And just
have an invisible conversation.
And then get someone to overdub with great answers.
Ben, would you please overdub with your... Well, hang on. Let's... Ben. First, I want you to introduce yourself in your normal voice.
I'm Ben Rasmussen. I work at KVNO Radio, and I'm the Director of Development.
Excellent. Now, would you please do that again in your radio voice?
Hi, I'm Ben Rasmussen. I work at KVNO Radio, and I am the Director of Development.
Phenomenal. Thank you very much. We're so glad you're here. Hold for... So if you're watching this on video, you are clearly noticing our new digs, which we're hoping to make more permanent digs at the Flatiron Co-op, hence the new huge blue couch.
Yeah.
There's a different huge couch that we have been recording on. This is new. Ben, thank you for helping us test it out.
I'm glad. I look forward to taking a nap on it later.
Perfect. It's a beautiful day for it in mid-May. We really wanted to have you on, one, because KVNO has been partners with the Omaha Symphony for a really long time. Two, because you and I have known each other for a really long time. But three, because we've talked to musicians. Now, this is our 15th episode, and we've talked to quite a few musicians who come from all different walks of life and experience, right? And I know for a fact that you are a secretly former tuba player turned classical radio fundraiser.
Yes.
And I have questions.
Ask away.
How?
Well, in the beginning. No, I mean, where do you want it to start?
What was your first? Do you remember your first orchestra concert? Was there a first orchestra concert?
There was, and it was actually an Omaha Symphony Christmas concert when I was like 8 or 9. Like our neighbors took us, and it was a different beast than it is today. There was less dancing, less set pieces, less theater going on. This might have, I think Ernest was with the symphony, but obviously this was not an Ernest production yet.
Okay, right. So Ernest joined the symphony in 1993
as the assistant conductor initially.
Yes.
Correct. Yes.
So this was the thing, and actually, no one should take this hard, but we left at intermission because all the kids were like, "Oh, we're so tired." It was like 90 minutes in, and intermission hit, and the kids were so tired, and it was late, and so we left. And then they told us later, "Oh, well, the rest of it would have been a lot more exciting and sing-along engaging." But this was over 30 years ago, so
if you and your daughter is currently a part of the Christmas celebration magic. So
she is, yeah.
You have learned your lesson.
Oh yeah. I've done my Christmas celebration time, so to speak, when it comes to the symphony. Enjoy it tremendously.
But that was your first concert. So
that was my first symphonic experience.
Okay. So what led you to tuba? Was that before tuba?
A wayward, winding path. Yeah, that was way before tuba. I didn't take up tuba until just before my junior year in high school. Like I started not as an instrumentalist at all. I sang in grade school and did some stuff in middle school. But the kids who were doing some instrumental stuff, first of all, they were always taken away. They went somewhere else, which I think is a mistake. You never get to see your peers making music. They went somewhere else to go do the school band, and they never were around in my grade school.
Okay, so you're saying that like if you were in singing in choir, you did that in class.
Yeah, in general, it was class stuff. We didn't have like a school choir in grade school,
Okay.
or middle school kind of situation.
And you're from, and obviously you are from Omaha.
Yes, and this was a smaller Catholic school, so it was music in Catholic schools came and visited each once a week, and they take the kids out and go do music stuff somewhere else.
Okay.
So I didn't see it. I didn't see any of my friends do it, so I didn't have any passion to go do this. High school rolls around. I knew no one then. I make friends with a couple of music people and some theater people. I'm like, oh, this is fun. Try out for musical theater. Funny story. First one was Little Shop of Horrors. And I had a line. My stage debut line was, warts? And that, warts got me into having all these music and music theater friends who said, try out for this, try out for that. And it was one thing after the other. Show choir, jazz band, because I had been teaching myself guitar.
Okay.
And then eventually junior year, tuba, because they knew I could read bass clef. I was playing electric bass. And they're like, oh, this is easy. You should be in band with tuba because it's easy and fun. All sorts of lies rolled into this. It was a great time. Don't get me wrong, but like I fell into tuba almost literally because I was kind of small at the time.
Well, it's a big instrument.
Yeah.
It's easy to fall into. I'm very concerned for people walking past Craig Fuller on a regular basis. It's just they're just one trip away from being stuck.
Yeah. I mean, like it is a falling hazard.
Okay, so your friends peer pressured you.
Oh yeah.
Into a massive instrument.
Yes.
Great. And then how long did you stay with it?
For a while, I got my own passion for it when I made all-state band, which was, looking back on it, it was because I took all sorts of other things and I did music theory, because the scale for the all-state tryout was like G-flat major. Mm-hmm. And I had to be one of the only kids who like had that down, because one thing I knew were my scales and the keys and everything. And I found out later that all the other kids were better at playing the instrument, but I got the scales better than all of them. So that's how I made all-state, but it was a great experience. I learned a lot. I learned about being a music teacher, so I wanted to go to school for music and be a teacher. Again, probably not the greatest idea. So I went to UNO, loved UNO. And while I was there, I was in the marching band. I was studying music ed, and I played tuba in the marching band, the orchestra, all sorts of different things. So I did that for about 6 years. So I was a tubist for about 8 years. And then finally my back had enough. And I graduated, didn't have to do it anymore. And so I haven't. But yeah.
You haven't, but okay, so that got you through the door.
Yeah.
More. I'm not going to say necessarily that tuba was what did you for classical music. You were already teaching yourself guitar. But what were you playing on guitar?
I mean, so Zeppelin, Hendrix, Smoke on the Water.
Never mind. Tuba did.
well, and it did. Tuba did. It was the gateway to what other music is out there besides what I would hear in, like my dad's work truck or in my grandpa's, office where he was listening to jazz. Like they all sort of had a little classical music here and there, but how I encountered it, besides that first Christmas concert, was, all-state band and seeing the orchestra rehearse and going to school and really sort of encountering all the things going on. I had not heard a live in-person Mozart symphony until I was a sophomore or junior in college. And Beethoven not till my senior year. Yeah. So that was kind of where I was falling into classical music. And right at that moment, there was an internship at this little radio station across the walkway, KVNO. And I'm like, oh, that'll be fun. I'd love to try that. And I knew about it because just weeks earlier, I'd heard a former teacher of mine be part-time host on there, and he played music from Lord of the Rings. I'm like, wow, there's something to this. And I really, really enjoyed that. And I just started listening more in my car. And I was like, this is something really special. I can listen to this. This is cool, right? And I don't have to be Led Zeppelin all the time. I can do something else. And so yeah, that was all sorts of stuff all at once in a very short period of time.
I love so many parts of that.
What do you want to unpack?
Well, I actually, the Lord of the Rings thing first. And the reason why that makes me really happy is because having been a Lord of the Rings nerd for a long time, I remember a moment in band in middle school where we were introduced to, I think it's Johann de Meiji. If I have the name, I will look it up if I have it wrong. I'm pretty sure it's de Meiji. He wrote a Lord of the Rings suite, and it's band music, and Shadowfax is one of the movements. And I was only familiar with the Howard Shore score at this point, and I thought that was like the only Lord of the Rings music out there. So to discover that this person who also wrote fantastic other music, including trombone solos, which I know because my husband, that he had written Lord of the Rings music. It was suddenly like, hang on a second, like what else is possible? And I wouldn't say that was like that was definitely not the moment where it's like, I want to be a classical musician, but it's like, oh, this is real. This isn't just, because sometimes the music you play in band, it's like Star Dance, or it's like, oh, this is a fun, exciting name that's just made up to get the kids to play in 5/8.
Yeah.
And here's this thing, the Ride of Shadowfax, and it's exciting and it's visceral, and your teacher's like, no, this is a real piece of music that real orchestras and real bands play, and it's a big deal. So that makes me really happy.
Yeah. And it makes me happy that I'm not the only Tolkien nerd here. So that warms my heart just a little bit. Warms my Grinchy heart.
You're
It's not very Grinchy, but yeah.
I mean, it's I like that it's a gateway in a way for you. It gives us hope that these kinds of concerts and live movies that we put on might also be gateways for other audience members, because you just don't know sometimes, right? Like what is it about the experience that's going to captivate them? And even if part of your job is loving classical music, and if we can bring anyone else closer to that, then that's the goal, right?
Yeah.
We've achieved the goal.
Yeah. And I think that especially film, I think, is a great gateway. I think we really emphasize it a lot because that's where we hear a lot of the great composers. Television music is also, especially from a period from the 50s through the 80s, there was a lot of well-composed television music. I mean, Star Trek and a lot of the Westerns that weren't television Westerns, they were shows instead, would also be something that would engage a certain segment of the population. Video game
Absolutely.
music,
I've played a lot.
has taken off a bit. Yeah.
Oh yes. At anime conventions, even that
Yes.
make us cross-cultural. Just the sharing of, and a lot of, I found for video game and anime, those are their first concert experiences, right? Instead of a Christmas concert, it's those kinds of experiences that become their first symphony experience.
And this is what anyone who thinks that there's, we just did this whole concert with Alexander Payne about this, but anyone who thinks that there's something lesser about a score, it's like, well, it's supposed to inspire you in some way. It doesn't necessarily always have to be sweeping or romantic or adventurous or exciting. It has to burgeon something within you. And as someone on radio, I imagine every single thing you pick, there's our former head of marketing said this to me. It's like, we do not have time for okay music or good music. Everything has to be great. If it's on that stage, it has to be great. And if it's on the radio, no matter what feeling it's doing, you don't have the benefit of images. You just have your hosts and you have the piece.
Yeah. And to that effect, I mean, you're always trying to think about someone flips on a car radio or they're pressing seek. What are they going to hear? I call it the drop the needle test. I used to be music director at the station for a while, which is an immensely stressful job because you are picking every single piece for every hour for every day. I'm glad I don't have to do that anymore. But the idea of at any given moment, if someone tunes in, are they going to be engaged by this? Is this going to be interesting to them? Is it going to fit their mood of what's going on? Are they in the car right now? Are they waking up? Are they sleeping? Are they eating dinner? What's going on in their life? And trying to figure out what is, first of all, good enough, but also like what's going to fit. Like there are certain things you can do and sound a lot better after dark musically. I found a lot more contemporary music sounds better after dark. I can't explain why, but I don't want to hear it before 5 p.m. It doesn't matter how monumental it is. If it's one of those great pieces, I'm trying to think of a great example. Berg's Violin Concerto. Not necessarily a very super harmonically challenging piece of music, all things considered, right? If you listen to it at 5 p.m., okay, it's light out, okay. If you listen to it at 9 p.m. after the sun's gone down, it's a different mood and it hits differently.
I really understand that because this is maybe a strange example, but if you think of lo-fi music, if you listen to that in the morning, there's this kind of calm and like, oh, it's like light. Mm-hmm. But if you listen to it at night, it kind of, the same music gets this kind of sultry, dark, I mean, literally dark kind of tone to it that gives you a different feeling. So I do understand this sense of, oh, it's contemporary. Now there's this edge that I can appreciate rather than kind of reject because it doesn't fit my imagination.
It's almost like it's a part of the film soundtrack to what you are living right now. Yeah. And it makes sense. There's a lot of things that we would normally say, oh, well, that's a little too edgy for me on stage or on the radio. But in film, we would allow it because what's going on, we would have no objection whatsoever because it fits what's going on. Yeah. And so if we think about, well, where does this fit what's going on with people's lives? What are you doing right now? 10 p.m. is a bit of an edgy time musically.
That's fair. I actually have a really hard time with the last time I attempted to listen to Shostakovich by myself. I don't know why I did it. I don't know why. I think I was trying to prove something to myself. And I picked Shostakovich 11 and I was by myself in my apartment and it was at night. And that's what I put on. I think I lasted for approximately 5 minutes. And then I was like, you know what? This is not a 10 p.m., 11 p.m. piece for me. This is daylight only.
Interesting. Nice.
But there's also a programmatic. It's the same way where my husband was watching Stranger Things, and I finally admitted I was interested in it, and then he went to rehearsal. I was like, oh, I'll catch up to where he is while he's gone, and then I realized I was by myself in the house with the basement door opening, and it's like, no, we're going back to the office. So
I mean, I love that the music has the ability to intensify the moment that you're in, and so it's almost like you're curating it to fit the moment that you're in, but you're also maybe rejecting the music sometimes because it's too much. Shostakovich 11 at 10 p.m.
too much
is so intense because of the context that
yeah. And I like that that's a really fantastic idea that you're not just in charge of putting good music on the radio, but really you're kind of in charge of curating people's potential moods as they head from point A to point B, wherever they happen to be going.
Yeah. And at the same time, you're not trying to be too lazy about it. This was something a colleague told me was, okay, just because it's 3 a.m., you don't want to only put on Adagio this and Largo this, but you should play a little bit of Wagner. You should play a little choral music during this time. if they're awake and listening, they want to hear something. And it shouldn't just be, you shouldn't punt your responsibility to make it engaging still. So yeah, you're curating mood, but it's sort of an overall over 2 or 3 hours mood as opposed to just at a moment. So yeah, it's, does that make sense?
It does. It does. Now I have more questions, Ben, which
Ask away.
so you started as an intern
Yes.
at KVNO. What was your internship?
I interned with the music director at the time. The idea was you would learn how to do an on-air shift. You would learn how to program a couple of hours of music. You would learn a bit about some of the other programs, like the classical kids programming and some other things, what fundraising was. And then about 2 months in, they fired the weekend overnight person. And the boss came in and said, do you want the job? So 2 a.m. to 7 a.m. live on Saturday and Sunday mornings.
Live?
Yeah. I mean, this was 20 years ago. We didn't have the ability to record that in advance necessarily, which we do now. We try to do as much live as makes sense, but that's a time when no one wants to do that live anymore. They'd rather record that a little earlier and get some sleep. But yeah.
I mean, I don't blame them, but that was your gateway. You were essentially like, it's looking around and it's Lord of the Rings. It's like, well, you got any 12-year-olds who can hold a sword?
Not in the studios, please. They just cause too much damage. And that was all a part of this sort of crash course of, I'm in college. I was a sophomore, junior at the time. I'm still teaching guitar at this point. Not just learning guitar, teaching guitar. I'm in the music ed program. I'm surrounded by 8,000 plus albums, some of them double, triple albums, some of 50 CD anthologies. And you're just seeing all of these things and you listen to it. And as you listen to it live, you start to remember things more. Like I will always remember what Handel's Harp Sonata, which someone thought to play every 2 weeks at 3 a.m. on a Saturday night, by the way. Not Harp Concerto, excuse me.
I'm actually not familiar with that one, so
I am. The number of things I am unfortunately familiar with. And it's a great piece. It's lovely.
The number of things you're unfortunately, I feel like everyone has their little thing, but this is so unique to say that you listen to this
to the point where it is unfortunate.
Well, it's a great piece, but someone was giving up and they just copied and pasted it over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of programming a Liszt concerto and saying that was too exciting, they did this piece over and over again. And that was an example of a colleague who changed a lot of things at the station, and those changes remain today. That at 3 a.m. it could be exciting. We shouldn't copy and paste too much. We should make sure that people get a new experience fresh every single time. If you play a Beethoven Symphony 3, let's play a different version, a different recording than some of the classics.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. And sometimes it doesn't even take someone doing a poor job to require change. Sometimes we just get way too comfortable. And I imagine, so one of the questions that I had for you is, if I were doing that job, I know that my first thought would almost always be orchestral music. It's just 24/7, because the orchestral rep is huge, or chamber music, right? But something that uses instruments that I'm familiar with. And then I realized, by thinking of KVNO, it's like, well, classical music is, if we're what's the meme? It's the little guy holding the balloon. He has no idea that there's a much bigger guy, a much bigger balloon. That's classical music. There's just so much beyond my own realm of experience. So when you start and you're having to make these fresh changes, is it overwhelming the amount of choice that you have? Is that a dumb question?
It's not a dumb question. The world of classical music is so broad. I know that, within what you just said, there is the question of what is classical music.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ask that question at the studio?
People ask us, so what is classical music? You know, and okay, what? And I can answer that in a minute, but the overwhelming anxiety-inducing burden of every single piece out there, how much do you put in? What is, you know, how much Beethoven versus how much Shostakovich? How much Bach versus how much Morricone? You know, trying to find that balance is anxiety-inducing, and some things help. Ironically enough, looking at what everyone else is doing. So we can look at other stations online and see, oh, what are they doing in Chicago? What are they doing in LA? What are they doing in, you know, Cincinnati? And most of the time what you look and see, you're like, I don't think that sounds good. Because you can also listen to, you can string this, you're doing this. And I don't like that. I don't think that works for us. But then you formed an opinion. And then almost the negative opinions of, I don't think that works at that time, or that works for us, is really almost better than, oh, this does work for us. Because it eliminates a lot of things instead of always going to a positive choice. By removing choice, it makes it a little less stressful.
Okay, so setting parameters basically by eliminating.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Also trying to find a few basic balances, points of balance. Like you've probably heard the phrase something old, something new, something borrowed, something blue. That was how, when I was in school for music, that's how they said program up your band concert, choir concert, whatever, something old, something new. Yeah, exactly. The faces that they're making.
Yep.
Something arranged, something that is not
originally written
for whatever your ensemble is.
Got that. All right.
And something blue was also what is outside of the current repertoire that you think of. So they were talking concert band. So what about, is there something jazzy, or is there something, you know, that involves more folk music? Blue was just anything outside of Mozart and Beethoven, like Strauss, that sort of stuff.
Love that.
And so when I would program an hour, I'd look at, okay, do I have something Baroque or classical, like through Beethoven? Do I have something? I didn't know, it wasn't a quota. I didn't have to, but did I have something? Did I have something romantic to 21st century? Something old, something new? Again, you don't have to, but you can look.
This is very similar to programming, to how we program a concert, where it's just you're varying the sound worlds that people are in and the type of experience that they're going to have. And so it is helpful to not have an entire Beethoven concert. It is helpful to not have the same orchestral color the entire concert. You need the break.
Yes. And then something borrowed, okay, what is outside of the standard? Okay, here's a symphony, here's a sonata. Okay, well, how about a choir piece? Or how about an opera aria? How about a film piece? Something blue. Well, here's an arrangement of an Irish folk song. That's not blue, that's green. But I mean, the idea is, what is outside of the Mozart, Beethoven sort of European mindset? Some William Grant Still or Florence Price, like some Scott Joplin, all these different things that you can then put with Piazzolla, get some tango in there. By
like
using
this.
Cleanser.
In a way.
And by using that sort of idea of, I want to make sure there is balance, and that I'm not just playing romantic symphonies, that I'm not just playing, a lot of stations I've discovered play a lot of Baroque and classical and not a lot of anything else. You don't get as much film music, except for in California. Lots of film music in California.
I like Classic
Is that west?
FM.
That way.
Yeah. Classic FM does a lot of film, and then Baroque, English Baroque.
Yes.
And then a lot of, I want to say easy listening.
Yes.
Is just the, like, I don't mean that in a negative way, but just in to describe.
So they're a great example, a commercial classical radio station from Britain. And they almost exclusively play movements of concertos and symphonies and sonatas and stuff. And so you're getting a lot of, here's the slow movement from this, here's the slow movement from that, here's the slow. And that was a place I looked at. and a great example of what did we reject for our station. We didn't want to be that station because it sounds good to a point, and then it's like, well, I'm looking for something more. I don't want to still be hungry. And
is that what you think? Do you think there's an Omaha sensibility to this programming that you are either aware of or not aware of as you program?
Yes. And it's from when people have made requests and called in to say, I like this or like that. Omaha people, first thing, love film scores. That is a big thing. Almost as much as people in LA. If you look at an LA station, KUSC, lots of film scores. But John Williams lives there. Half the composers lived there or live there for film. So that makes sense. Another thing is they lean romantic era to early 20th century here in the Omaha. And I think a part of it is haven't been a lot of early music traditions here in the Omaha Metro. And so we're not going to a lot of Baroque orchestra performances and really saying, oh, I love this Telemann, I love this Corelli and stuff. And so I think that in a way, there's sort of this lean toward that. But as soon as we do introduce Baroque and classical, early classical, oh, well, I like this too. They don't not like it. But we're not as heavy on it as, say, I won't name names, but let's just say closer to the Ohio River Valley, there's this sort of almost consistently, you won't hear anything written after 1820 regularly.
So it's almost like you're saying familiarity allows you to expand.
Yes.
So if you can start with a kernel of, we know we like these film scores, we know we like these composers, then you can expand the universe out from there.
Yes.
But you're starting in a place of comfort and then working out.
Yeah, you have sort of a core rep.
Yeah.
And you look at, what is the Omaha Symphony playing? What are people hearing? Mm-hmm. They're hearing Rhapsody in Blue. They're hearing Sibelius, Tchaikovsky. They're hearing Beethoven. They're hearing a lot of it. We look at what you do, and we find that a lot of that programming resonates. I work in radio. At the same time, the third sort of thing that I think is really important is choral and vocal music. Mm-hmm. And we've discovered in small doses, but a little more regularly, is appreciated. Because there's a lot of people who love the sound of the human voice. They love the singing. They love, which I do too. I mean, it's great. A little bit of opera, and not just like the instrumental excerpts, but like an aria, a chorus. So that's sort of the third on a three-legged stool, primarily romantic, classical is the first leg, expanding out from there what people might like in Baroque or 20th century, either way. And then making sure there's enough choral and vocal that because people appreciate that. As long as we've discovered if we play a little too much, then we start to get negative feedback, even from the people who love it, which is a really weird thing when you think about it.
In Canada, CBC Radio, we have a whole, I don't know how long it is, but it's certainly in the morning, there's a whole segment of just choral music. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this kind of fatigue, just like if we were to only, we can't do Mahler symphonies back to back or anything like that. And I think just a little bit of vocal music here and there is, we're able to appreciate it more for the contrast of the colors, of the timbres, of everything, of vocal music, and then instrumental. I don't know, there's something that's extra exciting about the idea of hearing vocal music after you've heard some chamber and all that, and then all of a sudden choir, and you go, wow.
Yes.
And you almost hear something different in what comes next, too.
Mm-hmm. And this is a personal opinion. I feel that the human voice is the most powerful and expressive instrument. Sorry about the bass. It's up there. It really is. But
is it? I want your list. Okay, voice.
tuba,
No.
bass.
No. I love the tuba, love-hate relationship with the tuba, but it's not toward the top of that list.
It's okay. So yes, in your humble opinion, the voice is the most expressive of instruments.
But it asks the most of the listener also. And in order for this to be a successful program, for people to hear it, you have to invest some of yourself into it. And that's some of yourself emotionally. Like if you come away from, oh, that was so beautiful, I'm crying. Oh, that was so beautiful, I'm crying. Eventually that effect diminishes, and it diminishes really quickly.
That's a fascinating idea. Do you think part of that is because, I'm not going to say everybody can sing, because not everybody can. I think everybody can attempt to sing. I would never sing in public for a good reason. But because everybody can make, to a degree, can make the attempt, do you think it's universal that expressive, that power of it hits more? It's why like community choirs are really popular, because it seems like the easiest way for you to rejoin a musical group or to be part of a musical group.
I think so. Also, we as human beings have been singing longer than there's been verbal speech.
Mm-hmm.
Like singing is something.
I would argue that everyone can sing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really, because there are so many languages out there that are tonal, in that I just don't believe that there are, that people can't. Maybe you think you're tone deaf. I don't believe anyone's tone deaf either. I think unless you don't have vocal cords, then you can't sing. But otherwise, I think everyone can sing.
Okay, I will accept.
It's my very sunny.
I actually agree with you. I mean, there are documented cases of a person where it's actually a matter of extreme brain trauma. Is like how far as far as it goes in order to not be able to sing. But also
the flip side
is that someone who can't talk due to extreme brain trauma, if you play one of their favorite songs from their youth, they will start singing sometimes, or dancing along when they cannot walk. Where this goes back to is that certain types of music making are fundamental to who we are as people and as a species. And so singing, what do people do to their kids when they're born? You feed them, you swaddle them, you change their diaper, you hold them close, you rock them, and you sing to them. I would argue there's not a living human being who has not been sung to.
That's fascinating. And then and again, so I wonder if that is why choral music, as powerful as it can be, why there is that threshold of, I can take this no longer.
And it also depends. Yeah, I think that is one of the reasons. I think also in the case of what I'm doing is radio, as opposed to a choral concert where you can go, you can read the program notes, you can read what it's about. We can only communicate so much about what is being sung. We can't run a translation ongoing. Like that's actually one of the biggest challenges with airing like the Met Opera. High quality broadcast, but trying to find the balance of how many times they sneak in to say, well, up next in this scene, they're going to do this. Usually it's act by act. And they translate what's going to be sung. Because if you don't know what they're singing about, sometimes that's off-putting. If there's a language barrier, that can be difficult. Sometimes it's not, I think. But trying to find that balance in radio, we've discovered a certain amount of singing is really powerful, and overdoing it doesn't make it more powerful. It actually diminishes.
That's so, and I would never think that, but again, like we said, I'm very well aware that like too much of the same type of music, the same type of symphony, the same time period, doesn't matter what composer you're talking about. At the end of a Mahler symphony, you've usually been beaten to death, and you don't need to hear another one right after intermission.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't. Mahler 8. Mahler 8 would be a perfectly
has voice. Both those.
Mahler 8 would be a perfectly lovely 45-minute symphony if he just left the second half.
But he didn't.
And so yeah, I find that as for programming for radio, that's really interesting, that you have to be constantly mindful of at what point your audience is going to need to tap out and move on to something else.
Mm-hmm.
So you're no longer programming music
for the whole station.
For the whole station, but you do your programs. Like you have your midday
Yes.
mixtape. I want to take you back to the symphony for a second.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I love most is you have 2 daughters,
Yes,
and Ida plays violin.
she
And
does.
one of my favorite things, I know where you sit, which is not supposed to be creepy out of context. Ben,
We wave at each other. It's great.
great. Ben, I know where you sit. It's not creepy at all. I really love when Ida comes to the symphony, and I'm very curious about how old is she now?
She's 10.
Okay, how do you? And she comes to Masterworks. Like she's here for it. I love it. How do you choose? Do you choose? Does Ida choose? How do you figure out what concert she's going to come to, and what will be a way for her not to need to tap out?
We do kind of look at what's going to be most interesting for her. What do we think that she's going to be able to make it through? Sometimes it's what sort of day has she had? Sometimes it's how many tickets do we have, and who's sick and who's feeling well? Because there's a number of grandma can come, mom can come, I can go. Do we have someone to watch the 2-year-old? Sometimes Ida has come simply because I wasn't going, because I'm at home with the 2-year-old, and she's there having a new experience. Whether or not we think, oh, she'll be fine at this one, it's not too long. No, she's going to give it a go, and that is what it is. So do we curate it? Only a little. It's more of the practical concerns of, do we have enough tickets together? And then do we actually think, like if it was a Mahler symphony, we'd probably, maybe Mahler 4, I don't know, maybe Mahler 1. I mean, I don't know, that's a long time for a 10-year-old to sit during one piece. But so is, Rachmaninoff Symphony 2 is the same.
Yep.
It's right up there in that range. But I would want to sit through it. The Pulse of the Planets, another one. That's 50 minutes. She didn't go to that one. We were pretty deliberate about that because we thought that one would be too long. So yes, there's some curation. Sometimes we get a notion of, oh, there's a young violinist who's going to be the soloist, or here's a piece you might like. Like, I've given up my seat willingly in those cases. In part because, okay, I'll get to hear the concerts on KVNO later. And if I really wanted to, I could probably email you and be like, hey, Saturday night, could you find something somewhere for me to be?
Yeah.
How many times have you guys seen me backstage and you're like, Ben, what are you doing here?
Enough.
Yeah, more than enough.
So whose idea was it to start going? Had you already established after getting into your classical life path with the radio, did you decide that you were going to start bringing Ida, or did Ida decide that she wanted to experience it?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
A little bit of both. She had to be open to it, and she has always been open to it whenever we've taken her. If she was ever not, I'm too tired or I don't want to, we wouldn't. That started probably age 9. It wasn't too long ago. We took her to some of the other non-Masterworks programs, like a few of the film, for example, I forget what you guys call them, but film series ones.
Yeah.
She's obviously seen like 1 or 2 different Pops ones, Home Alone in concert, that sort of stuff. The Warner Brothers.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
that's funny.
Exactly. Like she's had some experiences already with that before we took her to the first Masterworks, which I want to say it wasn't her first, but the first one I remember her being at was Emanuel Axe.
I was gonna ask. Oh, that's great.
Playing Mozart, and I wasn't there for that one because the next night I was backstage getting to interview him for their live broadcast, which was great. I'm like, yes, you can take my ticket because I'll watch it live later.
Oh man, that's a great first concert.
Yeah.
Brahms 2 was on the second half of it.
Yes.
And he did the Chopin Andante Spianato and Paul. To start off that program, Star Spangled Banner, great, but the Andante is famously piano solo only, and so it was an interesting moment for us as an orchestra. Of we were talking about this earlier with the Brandenburg, where you just kind of have to sit. And it was an interesting moment as the entire Chopin-sized orchestra just got to enjoy a solo performance by Emmanuel Axe live 2 nights in a row.
Yeah.
It was really something. And
then it's not like a 2-minute introduction. What is it? It's like 8 or 9 minutes, isn't it?
It's something.
And then you have to play right afterward. You don't really get to stop and take it all in, because then you have to join for the Grand Polonaise.
Which makes me happy I'm not a French horn player, because that's who starts the Grand Polonaise. I love that, and I love whose idea was violin lessons for Ida.
That was Ida's idea. So actually, she came to an Omaha Chamber Music Society event at I want to say it was Gallery 1516, and there were some other students who were playing there, and I'm trying to remember his name. He's also studied with Anne Nagoski for quite a while and was a classical kid. I'm trying to remember his name, but he had played, a few other people had played, and Anne Nagoski was there, and Ida, being 4 or 5 at the time, was sort of like, whatever, okay. But like paid attention at various points and was really taken in at various points. And Anne there said, well, if you're ever interested, because she said, I want to play violin. She said, if you're ever interested, Ben, I can put you on the wait list. I said, that's great. And then a few months later, she decided she wanted to. And so she told us. And so we got put on the wait list, and we were pretty quickly in the studio after that, because it was summer. So there was a new batch of new students. And Megan is my partner, didn't know what we were getting into when it came to getting the first instrument, because she thought it was going to be like a much less expensive, like something you get from, not like Walmart, but like what that first instrument still for a young person is still quite the investment to begin with. And so that was kind of an amusing experience for her, because you start trying out, okay, what's the right size and all that sort of stuff, and going, and she sees the price tag. Yeah, that first initial shock.
But probably around the same as a tuba, if not less. I would imagine a tuba is still.
Tuba is way more, but I always played a school instrument. That's the other thing about tuba, is that because there's a rotating cast of characters, they're all characters. A lot of times they don't have their own instrument until a certain point, usually in college.
Okay, so no one was warned about the violin, right? Like, nope. A steep slope to other nonsense.
I knew that it would be about what it was going to be, and we were directed to a source that was not too expensive but still high quality, and that was good.
Well, as you know, because of as you also know, like an instrument can make the difference between continuing to play and giving up quickly. And if you that said, having heard violinists when they first start, I know that is a unique form of mental exercise and fortitude of listening to any string instrument, any instrument besides piano to a degree, because at least piano is in tune and you're not in charge of that. But an upper string instrument requires a lot of patience on everybody around the listener, around the player rather, included.
Yes.
So it can make a huge difference for the player, but even for those around who have to deal with the daily exercises of learning how to play the instrument is,
Yes.
Yeah.
So is there, what specifically is the question with that is, what was it like?
No. I guess my question is like, so Megan does not come from a classical background.
Not necessarily. I mean, I think she took an instrument for a few months and her brother played trumpet for a little while. And so she wasn't completely unfamiliar with, and she can sing. She's so humble about it, but she can sing, not like a classically trained, but you hear her sing along with the radio and you're just like, gosh, you have a beautiful voice.
Mm-hmm.
You should do this more. But yeah, that experience was definitely new for her. As it was for me for violin. I mean, I've been with many beginning guitar students. So it was a little bit of a learning curve, but also, Anne explained, this is your step, this is what you do. And Megan has always been supportive while being firm. You better go practice. Like Ida listens to her when she says that. And goodness knows if I say it 1,000 times before she does. Yes, Ida, that's true.
Okay, so I guess my actual question should have been, if you hadn't had your KVNO background, you probably wouldn't have started volunteering with OCMS.
Yeah.
Which means that, if and when you eventually had kids, do you feel like even just your tuba, like let's say we said like everything else in life aside, was tuba enough for you to know that there was joy and validation and personal growth to be had in choosing an instrument? Do you think that would have been enough, or do you think your fortuitous choices and circumstances led to kind of where you are now?
I would say more so like guitar was. I would say if you take out KVNO,
okay,
and he said, just because I've taught guitar for a long time, that to me, and I found myself as a musician, as a guitarist, and then later mandolin. So if we include that, then that, yes, definitely, because I tried all sorts of different things and listened to classical guitar, which introduces you to all sorts of great things.
When you say that you found yourself as a musician in guitar, what do you mean by that?
I was never barely proficient as a tuba player is probably the best description of me at my peak. There are people who make an amazing sound. Craig Fuller is so good. You can always hear him in the Holland, by the way. When he plays, it always resonates. And you can hear him, and he has a great tone and just a lovely lyrical style when he's playing something beautiful, and especially, and there are other great tuba players out there. I was never that tuba player. And that wasn't really my musical voice. Mm-hmm. It was actually, as I was exploring guitar, and actually I'd even say closer to finding fiddle music and Americana and folk music and Celtic music. That was where I found what I wanted to play on a regular basis, what drove me, what still motivates me today. And it also affords me the most performance opportunities since college. Mm-hmm. So that's what I mean by finding myself as a musician. Like, where's my joy and passion with it to actually create? I'm not a songwriter. I don't really belong in a rock band. I can, but I'm not the soloist, doing the Eddie Van Halen. I learned some of it, but I don't need to do that. But that was the direction that really, I want to do this. And if I could do anything to pick up an instrument, it would be, I'd start playing something like the Road to Listonvarna or the Kesh Jig or, Silver Spear Reel and stuff like that.
So do you think, so I'm going to change the question slightly.
Yeah.
Do you think finding your joy and your ability to create music with guitar, do you think that is what has led you at KVNO to continue to find joy in putting music together for people who are both classical music enthusiasts and the classically curious?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I won't say I feel like they're two separate worlds, because there is a lot of intersection between my joy as a musician and my joy in bringing classical music to people. I will say that on this hand, the classical music hand, what I find is what I listened to a lot and I read about a lot, and I have stories to share, and the pieces I heard at 3 a.m. on a Saturday over and over again and I have something to say about it, and then someone new discovers it and they call in and say something. So that is sort of its own self-feeding ecosystem. That being said, having a passion for it, another type of music, guitar and folk music and fiddle music, I have something to talk about when it comes to Dvorak. Of, this is the music that he would hear in a pub, or a tavern. Maybe they didn't call it a pub in Prague, but, and this is the music that the songs his mother sang to him and things like that. This is the music that was a part of him, even if it wasn't a part of this higher classical world. And he brought it, elevated this music. Just like in Britain, you get Ralph Vaughan Williams and Gustav Holst. Mm-hmm. Just like you get, Irish music in Leroy Anderson stuff and all over, really. So yes and no, this sort of feeds itself, this ecosystem of sharing something that I learned about and sharing that joy of learning about it with others.
Yeah.
That feeds itself. It's a monster that I can't stop.
Does your midday mixtape situation, when you bring in musicians that then also are bringing in what feeds them, does that kind of give you a little bit every week? That's
Yes.
What's that experience been like?
It's a very interesting experience, which is sort of the blandest way to say anything. But I mean it truly, because one week I'll have a listener who says, I don't know much about music, but these are my 5 favorite pieces. And I say, that's fine. Let's just talk about what you enjoy about it. And then she'll share something about how this was the piece that I used to, that my grandmother used to sing as she was cooking in the kitchen. And this is a piece of music that reminds me of my home in the fall. And all these, okay, this is not music theory or music history, like learning about Brahms or Shostakovich. It's learning about the person and what they enjoy. And I love that. And then you get a classically trained musician who has to turn off here's the music history and theory and everything. And I ask them to, because then we find out great stories about Anne Nagoski, great example. She was on the Mixtape and she talked about her childhood and like overdubbing tapes, audition tapes, because her dad worked at the conservatory, and discovering this piece of music. What is this? Well, we'll find out. And going on a trip to Russia and hearing this random choir in a church singing something that was just so moving. And it's not about what they know, their knowledge and experience. It's what they feel. And it's about their humanity and about their passion. And that's something that we can all share. You don't have to have a master's degree to love Mendelssohn or Shostakovich or Bach. And I love it tremendously. It is difficult. It is the hardest thing I've had to do. It's harder than programming the whole station, because trying to get someone who has a million ideas to cut it down to 6, 5 or 6 pieces, 43 minutes. And then when they do, half the time you're like, but we really can't play all classical guitar. Well, Mixtape is the name of the program. And so like trying to work with them to understand the needs of the audience and trying to understand that a mixtape, if you don't know the nomenclature, the idea is that this is something you would put together for someone else. You make a mixtape and you go on a road trip with a friend, or you give it as a birthday gift or a graduation gift. That's how I did. I made like 200 of these when I was in high school or early college.
But like how often though have you had the experience where you fall in love with something and all you want more than anything else in the world is for someone else to see the thing you love most for what it is and offering, just like, please, if you like this as much as I do, and like,
yeah.
And a mix, yes, in an ideal world, a mixtape is a collection of things that all go together to tell this story. But how often is it just like the single thing that you become obsessed with? Like, please love this as much as I do. I actually had to stop watching. I had to stop going out into the hall to watch the orchestra perform on pieces that I love best, because when we did Pulcinella in 2020, that is the piece I love most in the entire world. And I could not stop watching audience members and analyzing how much they were enjoying it based on their behavior. And it drove me insane. It made me I couldn't enjoy the music because I was too busy watching my heart be split amongst the 400 or so people that were there, and watching some of them choose to not love it the way I loved it. So how do you convince people that it's not so much like, here, please accept this humble offering of the thing I love most, but how do you get them to turn it into, you have an hour, convince me.
Well, and that is a great example of, it doesn't have to be great radio as in it has to have something old, something new, borrowed, blue. It doesn't have to follow that format. But it does have to be, what I find when people come in, not with the music that they're passionate about, but what they think is important. I think this piece of music is important. To you? Well, no, in music history. And I say, well, what's important to you? And sometimes it doesn't necessarily make for the most variety of playlists. You might get a Rossini overture, a Beethoven sonata, and Rhapsody in Blue, and a film score. And okay, that doesn't have a huge amount. There's some variety, but it's all within a narrower band. But then they're talking about, I heard Rhapsody in Blue, for the first time in Fantasia 2000, and I didn't realize just how much this music meant to me, and it has this motion and kept me going. Or this Beethoven sonata, the night my parents died, was on the station, and I listened to it and cried in my driveway. That's what I want them to bring to the table. It doesn't have to be perfect radio from a programmer's standpoint. I want them to be themselves. I want them to bring the passion. And if they bring that, it's not so much convincing everyone to love what they are bringing, as much as it is giving them a relatable experience to say, this is why I love it. I hope you do too.
So is it fair to summarize a great programming segment on KVNO as not a perfect segment of music, but rather a segment of music where everyone can find a personal moment?
Yeah, they can find something to connect to, which is, there are entire hours I'm sure people will listen to and they're like, I didn't connect with that piece. I didn't connect with that piece. I didn't connect with that piece. That happens. But you have to, sometimes it's throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. And sometimes it's what we call delivery dependent programming. Sometimes it's a piece of music that you need a little bit of backstory. I mean, great. Can I share one?
Yeah, please.
So Claire de Lune. Almost everyone knows Debussy's Claire de Lune. I can't play piano, so ignore all this stuff going on. And most people like it. Oh, it's nice. It's calming. If I need to connect with people, if I feel I haven't established that connection with people, the story I shared, which is absolutely true, is on the night the 10-year-old Ida was born, she would not stop crying. She wouldn't stop to eat. She wouldn't stop for anything at all, to the point there was worry, is there something wrong? Do we need to start having tests done? Megan was exhausted. At one point, she was just passed out because it was a long process. And I had my laptop there, and I pulled it out, and I pulled up the first thing I could. And on KVNO that night the first piece was a piano version of Claire de Lune. 90 seconds in, she was out. For 4 glorious hours, she was at peace. And you may not feel the same experience about this particular piece, but I invite you to feel what you can, find in it what you can to bring you something, whether it's peace, it's joy, maybe a little rolling bass brings you a little bit of movement in your afternoon, whatever it is for you. That's the story I would tell.
Ben, I could not have. I think that's where we have to call it a day. That's beautiful. And I appreciate the glimpse into, that very personal moment.
Well, thank you, Dani.
And now I know if I see Ida and I ever have to hit the pause button. Okay. No,
I don't think it works anymore.
Ida's the best, actually. Ida plays in Christmas Celebration. I love getting that chance to high five her backstage for Christmas.
Yeah.
Ben, thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Dani.
Would you please do us the honor of signing us off in your best KVNO radio voice?
All right, do I have a script?
No.
Well, for the Omaha Symphony podcast, farewell, good luck, and have a great day.